Today marks the feast of the third day of the reception of the Book of the Law. I've owned many copies of Crowley's received text. Unfortunately, hard times had me part with many of my most treasured editions. I do have a 80s edition of the Holy Books of Thelema, which is a very nice edition, collecting many of his writings, all very important to Thelema. I picked this up a couple of years ago, which is a nice hardcover diary of a drug fiend and other works, which, in addition to the novels Diary of a Drug Fiend and Moonchild, also contains the Book of Lies, the Book of the Law, and it's a really well done edition. It also has white stains, which I first read when I was in college. I had taken anthropology courses, and I was in an independent study of witchcraft, magic, and religion under the tutelage of Dr. Floyes Minor. And she gave me access to the library stacks, the archives, and just there was a wealth of items in there that just, normal students didn't have access to. And they had a few first edition Crowleys, white stains included, which I was allowed to peruse. And anyway, that my journey with Crowley really began in the mid-1980s. Of course, I knew who he was. Anyone with an interest in the occult knew the name Aleister Crowley. But the Book of the Law, let's just go back to that. I mean, I don't need to rehash the story, right? Crowley on a trip with his new bride, Rose, to Cairo, and Crowley had performed a ritual in the Great Pyramid. They later went to the Cairo Museum, where Rose led him to exhibit number 666, which was the Stela of Revealing, and that sparked Rose informing him that he would be met by an otherworldly presence who would instruct him over the course of 3 days. That was 8th, 9th, and 10th, which is why today we celebrate the third day of the writing of the Book of the Law. So the entity, I came to him reciting the text on each chapter on each of the successive days, and Crowley kind of put it away, and then dusted it off some years later, and thus Thelema was born. Now, there's a lot of debate among the occult community as to whether the reception actually took place, if it was Crowley subconscious, if it was a hoax by Crowley that he later doubled down on, if it was a legitimate communication from an intelligence beyond mortal man. For me, I don't think it matters, right? So the text itself is as poetry. It's beautiful. It's evocative, it's contradictory, it's a magnificent piece of work. But if it was not received from a preternatural intelligence, then Crowley was able to tap into his holy guardian angel, his, subgenius, and present a truly remarkable piece of art. And that's the way I see the Book of the Law. It's a terrific, a terrific work of poetry. I never felt a personal connection with Egypt, and I understand now that the Egyptian trappings of the Book of the Law are perceived differently, that the deities within, while they have similar names, it's not actually an Egyptian mythos that it is describing. At least that's the way it's commonly accepted now. However, when I was younger, I took it more literal. And so seeing that I felt like the Book of the Law may actually be heralding a new age, I thought it would be interesting to place it in a pantheon that was more conducive to my line of thinking, and hence the Norse version of the text was created. Unfortunately, that notebook met an untimely end. It was my only copy. This was, pre-internet, so I no longer have access to that. There is a segment of the occult community that just does not buy the story of Crowley's reception at all. They think it's a complete and utter hoax that, as I said, later doubled down on. And that brings me to the work by Richard T. Cole, whichever side of the fence you fall on, this is certainly an entertaining book that just does a deep dive into Crowley's experience in Cairo. He really does an excellent job of just breaking the whole thing down. I don't think he's wholly accurate in his critique, but that does not make it any less of an entertaining read. He says, "To my mind, it appears almost certain that there was no cross-examination of Rose, no Balak visit, no reception, no AWAS, no Book of the Law, no lost manuscript, and no Thelema. All were fantasies conjured from the mind of an obsessive psychopath in furtherance of his grand delusion of I, Crowley, the chosen one." Those are the words of Richard T. Cole. We cannot blame Aleister Crowley for a culture that transliterated "do what thou wilt" into "do what I want." We live in hope that, having gorged itself to bloatation on an orgy of liberties unimaginable in Crowley's day, the bastard offspring of his new Anne will come to understand by magical or other means the responsibilities inherent in rites so familiar as to breed contempt. This came along with my book, to which I was very thankful. That was some years ago. But for those who celebrate, I wish you a happy feast on this day of the final day of the reception and the writing thereof. As I've said, the book is truly some brilliant, brilliant prose. I know a lot of you, and I'm speaking to the younger crowd now, came to knowledge of the Book of the Law through Hellier. You'll find that Crowley and Thelema permeate a lot of what we refer to as high strangeness. And for those of us a bit longer in the tooth, we've seen this day coming for a long time. The pandemic, the lockdowns, saw an explosion of a rise in Thelema. Now that's starting to wane a bit now, perhaps, but still it is at the forefront of so much magical thought that it feels like the catalyst of change. We're also dealing now with the UAP reevaluation. It's a time of presumed disclosure, and whenever we start talking about UFOs and the like, go back to Lamb. That Crowley image that Kenneth Grant kind of latched onto and shined a greater spotlight upon just conveys to me that connection with otherworldliness. You just see all these synchronicities and how everything is sort of tethered together. Those who kind of operate in those liminal spaces, it tears us apart as much as it brings us together. And I think that's, you can read that in the Book of the Law. You can see that conflict and see it kind of played out in this strange and wonderful age we've found ourselves in. But I am rambling way too much, so I'll apologize for any incoherencies and pervasive ramblings, and I will leave you to it. So for those of you who are entwined in such thought, we will talk again very soon. 23 Skidoo.